First of all, introducing our challenger.
Out of the blue corner.
He's going to step in and he does. It's all over.
Let's bring on the boom.
This is Eternal MMA.
Right, everybody, welcome back, and thank you for joining us here once again for another edition of the Eternal Insiders Podcast, powered by Fight HQ, your official uniform partner for Eternal MMA. And with that, let us welcome in today's guest here to talk about the massive card that was at Eternal 87 in Perth, Western Australia over the weekend. That hot card right on the eve of UFC 305. What a weekend it was for Australian combat sports. We're here to talk all about it. Massive amount of fights, 3 title fights, a couple of trilogy fights to go through. A lot of really cool things to come out of that one. And, of course, Ben Vickers, the co-promoter for Eternal MMA, here to give us his thoughts, kind enough to join us on a very sunny day where he's sort of hanging out, a little bit better looking than where I'm sort of dealing with down here. But thanks for joining us here, Ben. I know you're a man with very limited amount of time, sitting there on a footy field, enjoying the sun and everything, so always appreciate it. How are things with you, man? What a weekend that was. Crazy times, but very good times.
Yeah, absolutely. And this country's beautiful. You know, I'm so blessed to have landed in Australia and set up a life here. And I'm somewhere in rural Australia at the moment in the hills, and it's just amazing. So it's been much needed after the chaos that was that week, last week of Eternal and then UFC 305 and all the Eternal alumni going out on that. So, yeah, it's been awesome. It's been absolutely awesome. We couldn't have really asked for much more.
No, absolutely. And I mean, just on that, in terms of the overall success of the event, of course, 3 title fights, some incredible fights on there. Like we said, a couple of trilogy fights. Massive build up to this one. It wasn't, of course, about its challenges in terms of having to rematch a couple of fighters on the card, but pulled out all the stops and made some incredible things happen. Just your overall thoughts in terms of the success of the card and how happy you were with it.
Yeah, it's an absolutely amazing week. As always, as a fight promoter, you just have to get used to the challenges that come in fight week with people pulling out and things happening and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a chaotic week, and then obviously having having Casey fighting on the UFC as well put him a little bit out of action with Eternal, although he still always does his end. He didn't do as much as normal, and I had to do a bit more, which is not to my liking, but I understand the reasoning, and he did the same for me when Jack Della fought there in February the year before. So, yeah, hectic week, and then some last-minute changes, but I think everything worked out for the best in the end.
No, it certainly did. I mean, the biggest story, of course, coming out of that one, out of the co-main event, Harry Webb versus Kevin Coppermell, originally scheduled as Harry Webb versus David Martinez, of course, so you found out with what I think Kevin had 6 hours notice to come from his fight that was originally pulled out into this one. Talk us through a little bit about that and sort of how that kind of came together. I can't imagine like how stressful that must be, sort of putting something like that together. But out of the ashes, rise an absolute phoenix of a fight between Harry and Kevin. Just like, let's call it what it is, probably the greatest title fight, if not the greatest fight we've seen here on Australian soil, at least in my opinion. Talk us through how that sort of came together.
Yeah, look, first of all, I hope Ethan Mitchell and Dave Martinez have speedy recoveries from their ailments, and we can get them back in the cage soon. You know, Ethan was very unfortunate and did everything he could to make the cage, but just couldn't. And then for Dave, unfortunately, you know, and a lot of his team or someone from his team has been very vocal about saying it wasn't a weight cutting issue. For me, I'm not going to go too much into it because I don't know how much information is out there, but that I'm not on social media. But it was the night before the weight cut. Dave had an accident and hurt himself. Would he have had that accident if he wasn't cutting weight? Would he have been doing what he was doing if he wasn't cutting weight? For me, he wouldn't have, but I don't know the full details of the incident. So, but for me, it's a weight cutting issue. And unfortunately, that seems to plague Dave, and it's becoming a bit of a. People talk more about Dave's weight than his fighting, and that's distracting for him and distracting for everybody else. And I really feel like Dave has such a bright future, and he's such a good addition to the Eternal roster. We just need to sort out his weight issues. He made weight for the Wes Kappa fight and performed absolutely fantastically. So maybe he needs to go back to that, or maybe he needs to go up a weight. But the last thing we want is fighters getting hurt. You know, that's the last thing we want is the weight cut being that great that it's going to hurt fighters. So just that, I just wanted to put that out there on that, is that we wish Dave the best. Apologies for if there's been any misunderstandings, but to me, it's a weight cutting issue. And whatever it is, it's unfortunate. But it actually produced one of the best fights we've ever seen. So the way that came about was in the morning, I got the call that Dave was in hospital. We've had this before as well. You know, there's been a Dave in hospital the night before, a weigh-in before, and we can't keep putting him through this. So I was racking my brain as to the situation was fluid. You know, there was talk Dave might still be able to fight, etc., etc. But we weren't too keen on that, being that he's just been in hospital. And I had, funnily enough, just listened to Kevin Cophamill's interview on the radio that he did, even though he didn't have a fight. And I was thinking to myself, what a legend. You know, he must be so disappointed about not getting his fight, but he still fulfilled his media commitments. And I just listened to that. And then I got the call about Dave. We were talking about what to do. And I was like, what about Kev? I wonder if Kev will take it. Like, he's a featherweight, but obviously he's been eating for a couple of days. And, you know, it's a chance of a lifetime. So I rang Steve Walton for the second time in a week, an early morning call from the promoter, which you never want on fight week. So I always preface it with, I haven't got any bad news this time, just so everyone's heart rate can come down a little bit. And I just said, look, does Kev fancy this lightweight title shot? You know, he didn't. He was training for a fight. He hasn't got a fight, and this opportunity's arisen. And Steve was like, Steve Walton from Wolves Den, Kev's coach, was like, yeah, I think he'll take it, but let me ring him. And then when I saw Kev at weigh-ins, he went, I got the call from Steve early in the morning, and I was like, oh, what's happened now? Like, it's never good news when your coach rings you at 8 o'clock in the morning. And he was offered the fight, and he said he pushed aside his rusks, the South African rusks he was just about to eat, that are very dense and heavy and full of carbs, and started to cut weight. So what an absolute legend Kevin Cophamill is. And then the same has to be said for Harry Webb, if I'm honest, because he's training for a completely different fight. He's training for someone who's going to try and grapple with him predominantly, you would think. Obviously, you never know what a fight is going to do. And Dave's skills on the feet have definitely improved a lot of late. But much to the credit to the coaching of Ryan Doyle. So poor Harry, he's like training for one of the best grapplers, strong guy. Next, you know, he's up against a smaller striker almost, but a very good MMA fighter. The guys at Wolves Den put their MMA together so well, and as do the guys at Infinite. So it made for a mouth-watering clash, and the only thing he thought might make it different is that the weight difference. Like, obviously Harry's a big lightweight and Kev is a featherweight. So yeah, Kev was in, Harry was in. You know, both proper fighters, like, want to fight. You know, especially on this big stage, big platform with UFC matchmakers in attendance and stuff like that. So yeah, it all worked out, and we got the banger fight that produced itself on the night.
I know that was the co-main event. We had a main event, of course, but how can you not talk about this one? Because it was sort of, I mean, first thing, just to echo your sentiments, like, what a couple of gangsters, both Kevin and both Harry, for taking this fight. You know, just in terms of everything that, you know, like Harry's sort of been through with the gym and all that sort of stuff. You know, both the guys.
Yeah, I don't think you should use the term gangster to refer to Harry, mate. I think he'd be upset about that. I think it's a bit close to the bone.
That's fair play. I mean, look, you know, I'm always going to attribute that name to Harry because, I mean, like, you know, like, that's Central Victorian tough right there, man. Like, Harry's an incredible dude, an incredible fighter. And same to Kevin as well. There's a couple of things there too, because keen to get your thoughts in terms of these guys coming together and making this a fight, and sort of how different it is for both fighters in terms of, is it sort of a situation where Kevin almost has nothing to lose, right? Because he, you know, had a fight at featherweight that sort of fell through, and now he gets the chance to kind of come up and fight for a title all of a sudden, versus Harry, who you said was fighting a completely different fighter. The spotlight of the weekend was entirely on Harry, right? Like, this was supposed to be kind of the coronation of Harry, if you can get through a beast like David Martinez, and all of a sudden it becomes kind of a term that you used when I talked to you last time, almost a bit of a banana peel type fight. Like, now all of a sudden, this is a fight he's supposed to win because he's fighting, you know, a smaller guy. He's fighting a featherweight, a guy that's not as experienced as David Martinez. So all of a sudden, there's this extra pressure kind of heaped on him. Is that kind of, you're a coach, right? Like, is there a big gap in that mentality between two fighters with, you know, a guy that's got nothing to lose coming and fighting for a title versus a guy This is supposed to be the weekend all about him, and now he's fighting a guy he's supposed to beat. Like, how different is that mentality for those two guys coming into that fight, in your opinion?
I think you're exactly right. I think Kev goes in there, it's hard to say nothing to lose in fight sports because you can lose brain cells, you can lose teeth, you can lose all these kinds of things. But in terms of his career, other than physically, he did have nothing to lose. He was expected to lose, and he probably was expected to lose early.
Like, does he fight more free because of it? Does he fight more freely than what maybe Harry does? Like, is Harry more tense in this situation than maybe Kevin?
Yeah, I think so. And it does remind me a little bit of Jack Della, Basil Hafez. You go from fighting Sean Brady and you've put your whole effort into that camp. And then all of a sudden this dude gets signed from the regional scene and he's against the UFC Rookie of the Year and he's got nothing to lose. So he can go out there, and if he loses to Della, he's just got a UFC contract. He's won a UFC contract. So I've seen that firsthand, how hard it is for the guy that is supposed to win, and allegedly the better fighter. And both of those boys, if you look at Jack's fight with Basil, although, for me, he clearly won 2 rounds to 1 that fight. And some people give it the other way or whatever, but they just don't know what they're talking about. But same for Harry, he probably had a much tougher fight than he might have been envisioning before he stepped into the cage that day. But he got the job done. And as a fighter, that's all you can do. You've got to get the job done. You've got to back your skill set, and you've got to come out with the dub. And Harry did those things.
I mean, look, just for a guy like Kevin too, stepping up and taking this fight, Kevin fought the majority of his early career as an amateur for Eternal MMA before becoming a professional. Before we talk a little bit about Harry, can you talk a little bit about Kevin and sort of what you thought of Kevin as a prospect in terms of the early part of his fighting career? I don't know how much you saw in person because I don't know if he's spent most of it fighting in Perth or the Gold Coast or anything like that. But in terms of Kevin all of a sudden becoming a bit of a Australian, I know he's an Australian, but in terms of the scene, a bit of an Australian star overnight by fighting Harry, is this the kind of performance that you'd expect from a guy like Kevin based on what we've already seen from him? Yeah,
100%. Kev is someone I know very well. We actually live in, or did, I don't know where he lives now, but we used to live in the same suburb, which is pretty small. So I'd see him having a coffee in the morning and stuff like that. And we did actually some training sessions together, like fitness stuff, just when I was opening a new gym. I had some promo sessions going on, and Kev pitched up to one of those, just a circuit training session. And I've always found him a really nice guy, a very humble, down to earth. His although I'm not a religious man, his belief sort of is inspirational to me. He's just so, I feel like he gains so much from his belief in God, and he speaks so well, and he's so well rounded as a human. And then you watch the guy fight, and obviously growing up in Perth, coming up in Perth, watching him, I knew that he was a talent. There was no doubt about that. And with his mindset and all that to add to it, I had a feeling that Kev would end up at the top of the pile one of these days. I just didn't think it maybe would happen so soon.
What do you think he sort of does from here? Well, obviously not speculating in terms of like a potential fight or anything like that, but, the word is, and I think the general consensus is the stock goes up for both fighters. But, Kevin coming out losing the fight, but not sort of losing the night as it kind of was. Imagine he stays at featherweight and looks more opportunities there. But I guess sort of the world's his oyster at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if Kev rang me and said, I want to be on this card, but I'm going to do a lot for Kev. What he's done. He's one that's just proved that he's a gamer. He's going to get out there on short notice, and as a promotion, what more could you want? For a young man to put it all on the line. He's got an undefeated record. I know he was early in his pro career, but he's got an undefeated record. He's got all these things, and he's prepared to put it all on the line and back his skill set. He can pretty much have anything he wants. That guy, man.
And Harry, I mean, you think back to his debut at Eternal 75, you were commentating that event at Eternal 75. To your admission at the time, he wasn't on your radar. I mean, that's fair because he's a Central Victorian boy, fighting interstate and everything. He really put the entire Australian MMA community on notice with that fight. I had to get him on the podcast. Wasn't planning on doing any podcasts after that weekend because I was away myself, but you could just sort of tell how special he was at that sort of time. Was that, you can think back to that time after that fight with Oliver Schmidt at Eternal 75, could you tell straight away from watching that and not being familiar with him that he was sort of going to be as special as kind of what he's turning out to be?
Yeah, you can see it. He's got the X factor, he's got he's got it all. You know, he's got good size at the weight. His skills are good everywhere. The Infinite MMA boys are so well rounded. I've mentioned it before. Like, you look at Luke Daly as well. They can fight anywhere the fight goes, but they have a phenomenal skill set and phenomenal fight IQ. And it's just, I just think he is a really, really promising prospect for us here in Australia.
The weight of the world was sort of on Harry's shoulders coming into this one. You know, obviously Harry not having a gym, losing the gym, you know, to the arson attack and everything. You're a gym owner. The significance of not being able to train for a title fight inside your own gym, essentially having to put together a bit of a makeshift arrangement to sort of get prepared for what's the biggest fight of your life. How significant is that in terms of hampering your preparation, especially from a mental perspective, not being able to fight at your home?
Yeah, it's definitely not ideal, but you know, what do you need to train? Some mats and another person. So I'm sure that they managed to get all their work done. John's a consummate professional, and I'm sure that no stone was left unturned in finding them boys somewhere that was appropriate for them to get the work done. And it's such a shame that John has lost his livelihood, though. You know, he's training the boys in someone else's. It's just, and I don't know with insurance whether he'll ever get the loss of earnings back and all that kind of stuff. It's such a big thing to have happened to that team. It's super unfair, but so is life. And they have got on with it. They've picked themselves up, and they've been on a winning streak since that happened. So maybe it's just strengthened their resolve even further, but it definitely shouldn't be happening in 2024. I don't know what we're getting into here, but it's ridiculous.
I mean, yeah, just on that, to finish off with, I mean, hats off to the entire team, but I mean, especially for a kid like Harry Webb, who's just 24 years of age, to deal with everything that he's dealt with, you know, him coming in for this fight, you know, training outside of his gym, going through the attack on the gym and all that sort of thing, like, and just seeing how he carries himself, you know, on podcasts, you know, doing interviews, everything before the fight, everything after the fight, everything on social media. Like, this is a guy that's wise beyond his years, you know, speaks very well, but you can tell a lot of the time that, you know, coming into this, that there was distractions on his mind. So to be able to come through the other side of that and have one of the greatest fights we've ever seen in this country, and it told us a lot about Harry, and you can probably speak about this before we move on, but I mean, I think when he originally had the fight set up with David Martinez, the whole theme was like, you know, we know he can knock people out inside 60 seconds, but can he go into the deep waters across 5 rounds? I mean, I think Kevin, you know, took him into deeper waters than maybe even David sort of wouldn't have been able to, especially with the striking side of things. We learnt so much more about Harry Webb from that 5 rounds than I think we have in his entire career so far.
Yeah, 1,000,000%, 1,000,000%. And you can't teach that, you know, that's, you either got it or you haven't. And Harry's proved to everyone that he has it. So it might have been the last question that he needed to answer.
The ramifications of that sort of thing as well, with how much those guys put each other through. We saw some footage of both the guys backstage, Harry backstage, you know, being iced up and everything, you know, face all bloody. I think he had a broken jaw. Kevin, a lot of wounds himself. I assume an extended layoff would be for both of these guys, no doubt.
Yeah, you'd think so. I mean, like I've said a million times, I'm not on social media, so I don't really see anything that happens outside of my my own vision. So I haven't heard too much about the repercussions. I know Harry is possibly still in Perth, getting medical treatment and waiting to travel home, but I'm not 100% sure on that. The circumstance. Obviously, I left on holidays shortly after the show, and I haven't been in that much communications with anyone. But yeah, the ramifications of the fight for both of those guys are going to be deep. They need a lot of time to recover, and I would encourage both of them, much as I'd love to see them both fight again ASAP, to take the right amount of time and not try and rush back, because they've got plenty of time. They're both young, and I'd like to see them both come back and fulfill their potential, and not perhaps rush back too early and end up suffering as a result. So please take your time, boys, get healthy, and we'll make sure the appropriate matchups are ready for you when you're good to come back.
No, definitely wishing those guys a speedy recovery, and a nice little holiday has definitely been earned from both of those boys. Whatever they want to do for a couple of months, chill out, just enjoy life and soak up the performance that those guys both had. Winners and losers aside, nothing but winners for those couple of guys. Just incredible performances all around. Hats off to Harry for winning that title, And big up to Kevin for putting on an incredible performance coming up in a weight class. Like, no one loses in that fight. The fans win. Everyone sort of wins getting to watch that for what's going to stand the test of time in terms of echoing through eternity for the greatest performance we've seen in this country. So hats off to those boys. Can't wait to see him back. We had other fights on that card. That was, of course, the co-main event. We obviously had a main event for the featherweight title that was Dimps Gillies versus Seb Salai. After the featherweight Grand Prix, fight pretty much played out in terms of how you'd expect it, in terms of a stylistic matchup. Dimps coming forward with his crazy sort of style and Seb fighting off the back foot with his sort of karate style. Seb kind of ended up edging it, longer than sort of the fight went on. Managed to kind of deal with, Dimps coming forward, as Dimps sort of does. Curious in your thoughts on sort of that fight. Is Seb just so defensively sound and fought a really well-disciplined fight to kind of, be the matador, I guess, to Dimps' sort of bull. But it was a very nice fight, and hats off to Seb for the win.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think Seb's movement is exceptional, and he's so hard to hit. And I think it was frustrating a bit for Dimps that he just couldn't land that shot that he was looking for. And, Seb moved. He never stopped moving throughout the 5 rounds. His gas tank was on point. His skills are always on point. I've actually had the privilege of having him in the room for a few times and training with the boys. And I know he's well-rounded. I know he can fight everywhere, but obviously his extensive karate background is what he likes to lean on. And that blitz style and that elusive movement just proved a little bit too tricky for Dimps to just land the shots. Dimps did have moments of success, but what was telling at the end was Dimps got wobbled. And I don't think I've ever seen that before. With almost the last punch of the fight, it looked like Dimps got shook a little bit, and I've never seen that before. So I don't know whether that was fatigue and cumulative effect of 5 rounds of damage, or the power that Seb actually possesses in his hands, because obviously he's not renowned for knocking people out. Seb, he's more of a complete performance, slow, methodical, not slow, but a methodical and safety first, if you like. Without that doesn't be meant as a disparaging thing. Like, he's defensively responsible primarily, which I think is the way to be,
No, I think
so. Great performance and a great champion, someone who extols the virtues of martial arts and is a traditional martial artist. And you'll go a long way to meet a nicer man within the sport. So props to Seb, and I think Dimps is everyone's hero. You look at his story, and there was some great content, if no one's seen it yet, on YouTube released about him in the week of the fight, and I cried at the end of his Laid Bare episode. The man's been through so much, and he faces it all with a smile on his face from what I can see, and he comes out into the cage and does what he does for the fans every time. And I said to him, he's if not my favorite fighter outside of scrappy MMA, he's definitely up there, because I've had so much history of him over the years. I've been working with Dimps in many facets for many years, and I'm just a huge fan of the man. So it was hard. It was hard for me because I like both of the boys so much that it was sad that one of them had to lose. But I think the right man won at the end of the day.
I don't know if you ever sort of met a man who is in such stark contrast in terms of his personality outside of the cage versus who he is inside the cage, because he's just such a humbly spoken character outside of the cage, and when he gets in, he just sort of flips that switch and he's got that look on his face and that sort of style, and then when the fight's over, he just becomes a different person again. It's pretty remarkable to see. Yeah,
he's a special human.
And just for Seb as well, Seb's obviously fought a couple of times for Eternal MMA. I mean, you say he doesn't necessarily have that kind of knockout power. We've seen him with a massive highlight. I think it was Eternal 78 in Sydney, with a massive almost sort of knockout punch. It's not common for him, but he's certainly got that power. I think that moves him to 6-1 or 7-1 as a professional. I think he came in on a 5-fight winning streak. He's just been quietly doing work, for a couple of years now, and all of a sudden he's the featherweight champion. Very well-spoken guy, a lot of great skill, that unique blend of that karate style and that sort of blitz with a bit of power sort of mixed in. What do you sort of think the ceiling for a guy like Seb is?
I think the world is his oyster, he can go on and defend his belt. He's in a great place. He's got Joe Lopez as his head coach. He's got Alex Volkanovski and JVH as training partners in his weight class. Iron sharpens iron, and I think Seb's going to go on to bigger and better things.
we had another title fight, Frank Yanowski versus Colton Kilbara for the flyweight championship. We had 3 title fights that managed to stay together, which is incredible because that's a unique thing to sort of happen. We put together so many title fights. So massive achievement there. But Frank Yanowski survived the better part of 4 rounds of a rabid Colton Kilbara, wrestling, pressure, having to sort of deal with all of that. And then just comes out and completely changes the context of the fight with one switch left knee up the middle, finishes with a rear naked choke, just absolutely out of nowhere. The highlight of the night in terms of a finish, certainly. What a guy Frank Yanowski is. Curious as to what you said when you came into the cage, you had the belt and you had some words for him, because that was just like, what a moment that was. Completely flipped the script, came out as the flyweight champion. What did you share with Frank when you entered the cage after the fight had finished?
I just congratulated him on his performance, and he was very hyped up. And he said, something like, I can't remember, do you believe in me now, or something like that. And I'd never not believed it in Frank. I know how good Ant Trilogy is, but I've been watching Frank since I watched Frank knock someone out in my gym when he was young in an interclub. So I've been watching Frank for years. And I know how good he is, and what Steve Walton does at Wolves Den with those boys. And I said to Steve, I can't believe it's taken this long for you guys to get your first Eternal belt back to your gym because of the quality of fighters that they always put out at Wolves Den. So we had a little convo, and the crowd, I mean, Frank the Tank.
I was going to ask you that. Please touch on this, because I don't think I've heard the crowd at the HBF Stadium. We've heard a lot of HBF Stadium, like wild noise and that sort of thing, but the Frank the Tank chants, like just crazy. Yeah. Like the place is rocking. Like, how popular is this kid, for Christ's sake? Like, it was.
Yeah, he is super popular. And that night in particular, I've never heard HBF Stadium. I mean, it was the most people we've ever had in there, to be fair. But just given the weekend and the mood everyone was in and the vibe, we always have good vibes in the Eternal crowds. Very educated crowd and a very supportive local crowd as well. So it was super loud that night. Like when Becker, we'll talk about that in a minute as well. That was another pop. But Frank, pop of the night, 100%. As an individual, I think the Harry and Kevin fight during was loud, but Kev, to weather that storm, I mean, Colton Kilbara is some wrestler, man. Just a powerful little nugget. Good luck keeping him off you. And if that's a 3-round fight, Frank's going home with a loss, So, but I think Frank knew that he had 5 rounds and he was staying in the fight, and he was staying, even though it must have been frustrating for him and he was working really hard. It's a credit to his cardio that, he still looked pretty fresh as the 4th round opened, and he never let Colton get his hands on him in the 4th round. So, yeah, Frank's another one. I mean, the flyweight division is so hot right now. You've got Trilogy and on the contender. You got Goshi on the contender. Nickel just fought in the UFC. Then you got Yanowski, Kilbara. These are elite flyweights. That all could find a home for themselves in the UFC, and do work there. So, yeah, quite the achievement for Frank. And after the disappointment of losing that title fight against Trilogy, to bounce back and be up against it and still have the stuff to find that knee and find that finish. And you know what? He's a finisher because he jumped on that, and there was no chance. He gave Colton no chance. He got his moment. He got one moment in the whole fight, Frank, probably, and he took it like an absolute sniper. So couldn't be happier for that team. Couldn't be happier for those guys, and couldn't be happier for Frank the Tank. And I actually sent him 2 UFC tickets that night as well, so he got to go to the UFC as well.
Oh,
so
he wasn't already going to that.
No. So a good weekend for Frank the Tank.
Good weekend for Frank the Tank, and all the Frank the Tank fans, because again, just an absolutely rocking stadium for Frank the Tank. One of the most popular fighters, obviously, on that roster. Hopefully, we've got another stream of flyweights coming through that can give him a challenge. And I think that fight with Trilogy just kind of aged well for both guys, because obviously Anthony going to the Contender Series, going up against a young beast like Frank, who's just come in and done what he's sort of done. And then, of course, Frank's versus a guy like Anthony Trilogy, who's just shown that he's the hardest hitting flyweight we've got in the world. Let's put it that way. So, for both guys, big things in their future. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what comes for Frank next, because same thing, world's his oyster, and hopefully a lot of challenges out there for him. You touched on before as well, Jack Becker coming back and getting that Trilogy fight sorted out against Heeden Agilera. I think this was sort of the fight or the performance that Jack kind of needed personally. I know, when he originally came back, he had a loss and then he kind of had a win, which was sort of, so-so kind of performance. I know you're a man that says you like beautiful violence, you like finishes in your fights, and this was beautiful violence. Just what he needed, just what the doctor ordered for Jack to come out and just seal the win with the hammer fist on the ground. And he was amped after that fight, got up on the cage. You could tell how much it meant to him. This is just what he needed.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm so proud of Jack because what he's been through, not only physically but mentally, most people would be broken by now. And he's gone through, like at the age of 30 or 29, whenever it happened, a massive transformative life change. And he's changed a lot as a person. And it obviously changed the way he fought for a while. But as a team, it's not always been easy, and we've not always agreed about everything. Full disclosure, like Jack and I have had some fallings out over the last couple of years on this road, but I feel like we've come out the other side massively stronger as a team and as a coaching unit. And Ryan and Josh and everybody else in the gym have worked really hard with Jack. And Jack's a man who doesn't shy away from doing that hard work, and he's always doing the extra bits. And I feel like it's just all clicked in his brain, and I still think he's got more to give and more improvement to make, but this is just the start of him getting back to where he was pre-leg break. And the fact that he got to do it in that arena against the same person in the very place where it all started to go wrong for him, and he was able to put that all to bed in such spectacular fashion, sleeping someone like King Kong on the ground. That's what Jack Becker is. He's a physically dominant specimen who has great technical ability and a cast iron mindset. And good luck to anyone that has to step in front of that man moving forward, because he's so mentally strong now, and he's always had the skills. He's always been good. We know that. He's been good for years. He was fighting Callum Potter 6 years ago or something like that, in at the top of Australian sport. He's been there or thereabouts for so long. So for him, it's definitely go time. And I think we're going to see big things from Jack, and he's going to go to the next level.
That was sort of the theme before he broke his leg against Heeden in that fight, that, if he sort of got through that fight with a win and a good performance, that the UFC was kind of right there for him. Does this kind of put him back on track for that? Like, is that still a realistic goal for Jack at this point?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the UFC matchmakers look at sometimes. Sometimes some of their decisions they make baffle me. So sometimes I wonder if they even know what they're doing, if I'm honest. But because they have the biggest talent pool in the world to pick from, and they put out some stinkers. So and they sign some stinkers. So I don't quite know what's happening at the UFC, and I would hate to speculate as to what they will do. But does he deserve it? Yes. Is there a story? Does the UFC love a storyline? And what better story is there than Jack Becker's story? Everybody loves a comeback story, a Rocky story. So hopefully he gets what he deserves, but you don't always get what you deserve in this life. So he'll just keep plugging away. And I think he made mention of it in his post-fight speech. He's ready for the next level, but whoever's next, good luck. I think wherever he's got to fight next, that person who's going to stand across from him needs to bring their A game to even have a chance of surviving.
Speaking of deserving, you're certainly a man with a chip on his shoulder in terms of having fought in this country for a long time. Now with a pretty impressive record, he's sort of seen it all and done it all. Justin Van Heeden in the Trilogy fight against Rod Costa to seal that one. It's kind of ironic that the fight sort of went the way it did, because both guys have got an early finish over each other. I talked to both fighters before the fight, and they said they wouldn't be surprised if it, potentially ended up sort of going the distance just based off how they were already sort of fought each other. And it did sort of play out that way. But Justin coming out the winner for himself is kind of in a strange position, because he's fought so much in this country. His teammate is now the champion of his sort of division. He came out with the win, but it wasn't necessarily like a dominant performance or anything like that. Hats off to him and his durability and what he's sort of been able to do in this country, and especially that run he went on in 2022 was one of the most impressive runs we've sort of seen in recent memory. Where does he sort of go from here? All those sort of things considered, with his teammate as a champion in his division, 14-6 is his record now. He's in a bit of a strange spot.
Yeah, definitely, and I think we must state that run was started off the back of getting knocked out by Rod.
Yeah.
So maybe this is the catalyst for another impressive run for Justin Van Heeden. And like Justin for me is a consummate professional. You know, he fights anyone, anywhere, anytime, and turns up, and 9 times out of 10 puts on a freaking high level performance. You know, 99% of the time you get high level Justin. He's very consistent. The fight itself, I think, maybe panned out as we might have thought it would when two blokes have knocked each other out. They can be a bit tentative. They know they both hold the power to switch each other's lights off. It often brings a little bit of caution. And when you know each other well, you've shared the cage for a couple of occasions, it does make it a little bit harder and make it a little bit harder to get off your work, because the guy's so familiar with you and your style. And obviously when you get two good grapplers like that, sometimes the grappling doesn't happen as quickly as it might, and you end up with these striking matches. But yeah, it was a bit of an attritional fight, very close. And at the end of the day, Justin walks away with the chocolates, and he is in a difficult spot. But I think, like I say to all the guys, just keep winning. Win your next fight, you know, whoever that may be. You never know what the landscape's going to be like. God knows what's going to happen to Seb in his next fight, you know, or if he gets signed, or if he's going to go off to Contender Series or the next Tough, or, you know, you just don't know. So for Justin, it would just be get back in the gym, keep improving, and take the next fight and win it, and see where Seb is and see where the belt is, and go from there. But Justin's the man. You know, he gets a lot of flack, but I've always had a lot of time for Justin, and we do speak occasionally. I've got a lot of time for him, man. He's a good dude, and he takes a lot of shit, and he just keeps doing what he's doing, man. And yeah, I'm a Justin Van Heeden fan, that's for sure.
I'm a Justin Van Heeden fan myself. I've spoken to Justin a lot of times on the podcast, and not only, you know, a very good fighter and a very good gym, but an incredible teammate. You know, very selfless. You know, and most teammates, I'd assume, are selfless when it comes to their teammates. I'm sure there's some that aren't. But, you know, Justin, you know, right in Seb's corner straight away. Not that you think he sort of wouldn't be or anything, but there's opportunities that Justin's passed up for his teammates and everything. So he's very much, you know, team freestyle as much as he's team himself. So wish him nothing but the best, whatever, you know, comes next for him. You know, Rod as well, your student, Scrappy MMA. Obviously he came off the bantamweight title loss, came into this one to sort of complete the trilogy fight. Rod himself now sort of 8-8. I don't know if it's a possibility for him to potentially go back to bantamweight. Any inside thoughts on what you think might be next for Rod?
I haven't seen Rod since, and I haven't spoken. Oh, I spoke to him briefly afterwards. He feels like he won the fight. He's disappointed. He's a competitor at the end of the day, Rod. You know, he loves to compete. There's very few fighters that are more active than him in Australia, in both jiu-jitsu and MMA. Rod's another one who can do whatever he wants. You know, he can ask me, like, can I fight at bantamweight? Can I fight at lightweight? Can I have a heavyweight fight? Whatever he wants. Like, he's deserves everything, because he's a guy that you go, can you fight this guy? He goes, yeah. Can you fight this guy? Yeah. Short notice this guy? Yeah. Like, why does that guy not deserve everything? And he's at the point in his career now, I think he's 35, that he's just enjoying fighting and enjoying the process and enjoying the competition. So I'll go back, have a chat with him and see what he wants to do. If he goes, oh, I'd like some more international competition, I'll probably get him an international fighter. I think he deserves whatever he wants. And yeah, the result didn't go his way, but who doesn't want to watch Rod Costa fight? You know, I know his title performance where he lost the title wasn't his most inspiring performance, but there's so much talent there, and his stand-up is so good, and he just hasn't quite translated it into the cage yet, but it's coming. And then we've seen he's got power, and we've seen he can put people out. So whatever he wants, man.
I wanted to ask you too as well. I didn't get to see this fight and get to pay attention to it too much because I had company over just before the main card. I'm not going to run through the entire prelims or anything like that, but I wanted to get your thoughts on your man Khan Diarra because he had another great performance. From the parts that I got to watch on my iPad, which was just sort of keeping a sort of a semi-eye on it, but Khan Diarra... Hang on a minute.
Don't say semi and OnlyFans in the same sentence.
Yeah, sorry, you got me slipping there. So, you know, I'll start using that from now on each and every podcast, yeah? It was on OnlyFans. It was on OnlyFans, so we got to see part of that card through that. But I didn't get to pay too much attention to this fight, so I can't even recall necessarily how it ended or anything like that. But I know Kandiata is a guy that you're very keen on, and he's on the come up and he's making a lot of noise in the welterweight division. There's a lot of people suggesting that, hey, is he the next guy for sort of Lockie Stitt? He started off his career with a couple of losses, but now he's on a good winning streak and he's looking like a beast, especially after his last fight prior to this one. Just continues the train running. Good things in Kandiata's future. I think you said that he's a guy that'll be opening up most of your main cards, but we could be seeing him potentially in title fights sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. And he would have been opening the main card this time around, but because of the fight pullout, the schedule changed and we had to push him down because we had less fights. So we had to put more fights on the undercard. So I would have stuck to that. It just didn't, I couldn't drop Jack Becker or Rod Costa off because they're, because of where they stand in the region, as with fights and stuff like that. So unfortunately, he was the only one that could bounce off the main card. And obviously, given that he had a late replacement in the fight, he is the hardest man in Australia for me to match. And I feel for him because he trains hard. And I'm always saying, don't worry, I'll get you an opponent. I'll get you an opponent. I'll get you an opponent. And as a fighter, it's hard with a date but no opponent. It's hard to keep yourself motivated going through all the stuff that you're going through. So, but Khan never wavers. He's always there. He's always in the gym. He's always pushing hard, and he pushes the sort of work rate in the gym as well. He's that guy. So when he lost his opponent so close to the fight, I couldn't tell him, and I just couldn't bring myself to tell him. And then luckily enough, Goldie, James McBride, stepped up very short notice, out of his weight class and out of retirement. So what a gangster Goldie is, and probably the hardest head in Australian MMA. I mean, Khan hit him with some elbows that would have killed a mortal, and James, at the end, I was talking to him after the fight. It didn't look like anything had happened to him. But what a incredibly nice gentleman as well, James McBride is, and Matt Kane, who came over him, his coach, and props to them for taking a punt and coming out of retirement for one last go together as coach and fighter. And it was inspiring to see them hanging out the weekend and enjoying each other's company. And they also got to the UFC as well. So a great weekend for James to cap off his MMA career. But Khan has all the skills, all the tools, the physical attributes to be the next eternal welterweight champ. However, if Alden Bates and Lockie Stitt fight can still be made, I believe that's the right thing to do, because Alden was signed up for that fight and up for it and ready to go and looking forward to it. And unfortunately, Lockie couldn't back up in the short time there was between Sydney and, was it Sydney? Gold Coast, sorry, with the Varkey fight and the Perth show. So hopefully Lockie's on the mend and we can make the Alden fight and we find Khan one more. But if Alden's not keen, then I'm sure that Lockie, who doesn't want to see Lachlan Stitt face Khan? What a fight that would be.
That'd be an incredible fight. All of a sudden, the welterweight division is humming once again for Eternal MMA and some incredible Australian talent we got coming through in that division. Last couple before I let you go, man. I mean, just outside of just Eternal itself, I mean, what a weekend for Australian martial arts, but Perth martial arts, Perth mixed martial arts, like putting on an incredible show. Both for Eternal MMA and the UFC. Like we said, 4 former Eternal alumni going in the cage at the UFC, 3 of them coming out victorious, continuing that trend. I think at one point before this, we were 18-3 or something for Eternal MMA fighters before this one. Of course, the only one not getting the nod was Steve in that unfortunate fight for Steve, losing in the first round. But for Casey O'Neill, Tom Nolan, and Jack Jenkins getting the job done, each all in incredible fashion. What a nod for Australian MMA. What a nod for Eternal MMA. Hats off to those fighters. All round, great weekend for Australian mixed martial arts.
Yeah, and I was super lucky. Obviously, I'm very close to Casey and her family. So I got to do a lot of work with Case in the last, or not a lot of work, but I got a few sessions in with Case in the last couple of weeks before she fought. She came out to Perth early and just watching her in the gym, and she's had a rough trot, a big injury, 2 losses. For someone as proud and as fierce as Casey O'Neill, King Casey, that is hard to deal with. So mentally going into this fight, she had a lot to overcome. And I thought she looked brilliant against someone who's up and coming and rising. And her style, and a lot has to be attributed to her new team that she's gone to in Fight Ready in Arizona. And she looked phenomenal. She looked balanced. She looked measured. She looked patient. and she can freaking break dance, by the way.
Yeah, that was definitely the highlight of the night for sure.
Yeah, the ray gun was exceptional. So now, all in all, a great weekend for Eternal alumni. Tom Nolan with a great win, getting a few rounds, getting some time under his belt. Very important for him so early in his career. Who was the other one? Sorry, quickly. Jack Jenkins. Jack Jenkins looked phenomenal.
Yes, he did.
I mean, Herbert Burns for me didn't. As soon as his leg was chopped up, he gave up.
Yeah.
But so poor Jack was trying to make a fight out of someone who didn't want to fight. And he looked phenomenal. I mean, Jack Jenkins is a problem. You know, he's so compact in his strike. He's so dangerous. Those low leg kicks, as many people across this country can attest to.
Yes.
So much damage. And he's on a bit of I mean, the only loss he's had in his tenure is with the injury for me in a fight that he was doing really well in. So
he didn't get beaten in that fight, so to speak. He just kind of lost because of the injury, like he was on a great run.
So to see him back out there after a year, doing his thing and just being around Jack again. He was training at my little gym north of the river, Scrappy North, because they were living in Airbnb near there, and just hanging out with him a little bit and his team. They're such a good bunch, and I couldn't wish any more success for him. So it's really good to see that people that come through the Eternal pathway and get the hard fights, get tested regionally, can go out and hang. And I'm looking forward to seeing Trilogy show the levels. And Cody Heeden went out Tuesday and put on a phenomenal performance. He's fought on Eternal a lot of times. He's a kid who's got all the talent in the world and has just achieved his dream. So super happy for him. Quillen Sal killed up next week. Surely he's going to replicate what Cody did. I mean, he's a phenomenal fighter and a great young man, and someone I've had the utmost pleasure in having some small aspect of his career to help with in Eternal. So the future's so bright for the promotion and all the athletes within it. And we're really starting to make a splash in the UFC now, and Australian athletes in general, or Anzac athletes, should I say, in general. I mean, who doesn't love Dan Hooker? Dan Hooker might be the most fun man to watch fight, and the man who enjoys his job more than anyone. So super bright and exciting times for Anzac MMA and Eternal itself. So the future's bright, man.
I think it's more than a splash. I mean, I think it's an absolute tidal wave at this point. We talked about this last time I had you on the podcast in terms of how well we're positioned as a nation in terms of stacking up our talent, pound for pound in terms of, the population we have here versus everyone else in the world. And I think we're top three, if not the best positioned nation in terms of, the talent pool we got to sort of draw from and the constant just conveyor belt of fighters that we got going over. And Eternal MMA, of course, being at the forefront of that. It's incredible to see. It doesn't let us any end in sight. It's just fighter after fighter after fighter. And it makes me sort of think of some other nations like that just aren't doing this. And it makes, for how many promotions they sort of might have, and even like Canada comes to mind, for example. You don't see like any Canadian fighters like these days, for Christ's sake. And we've got Australia that's got like a pittance of the population. We're just churning out fighters like crazy. We're a fighting nation. It's very cool to see. And I'm just looking forward to the next wave of fighters that comes next for us. It's all in all,
let me just say this
incredible.
Before we carry on, but all these guys moaning about the flights. Oh, it's so far to get to Perth. I'm so tired. Blah, blah. We do it every fucking time.
Yes, we do.
Every time we fight from Australia, it's that.
Yep.
So those people need to understand what we're going through every time we travel. And I understand we live in a beautiful place that's far away from everywhere. But I hope some of these fighters understand now the duress we go through just to make it to the fights in the US, 30 hours flying. But DC didn't stop crying about it the whole time that he was in Perth. And, they need to respect the Australian athletes a little bit more for what they do travel-wise.
Mate, that bloke didn't even know that New Zealand wasn't part of Australia, so I don't think...
So embarrassing.
It's
so
weird.
embarrassing. Sort yourself out, DC. You're an embarrassment, mate.
Yeah, that was bizarre. But no, absolutely to echo those sentiments, like just that is true. And I mean, you got a guy like Jack Jenkins who's calling for his next fight to be over in Edmonton. So us boys over here, and I've got a special place in my heart for Jack Jenkins, another Central Victorian boy. But we're calling for fights overseas, wanting to go over and kick the heads off those guys there. So stop complaining about coming to Australia, because we do it both ways. And especially from Perth, like Perth especially, like making that trip, like that's nightmare fuel, man. Like, it's that's a longer travel. So hats off to everyone who does that for sure.
So to go to Miami, just to break it down for you, this is what we did. So we flew from Perth to Doha. That was 11 hours.
Yeah.
We had an hour layover and we got a 16-hour flight. So we did 27 hours basically flying. to land with 8 days to get ourselves ready for Gilbert Burns. So that's what Australian fighters are putting themselves through. You know, and then you get Yanks moaning about having to travel outside of the US. So, you know, you don't know how good you've got it until you understand what some other people are going through. But we're not going to moan about it. I mean, I enjoy the adventure. I like visiting the United States. I like visiting other countries. You know, it's all part of the process. And I've always said, if someone's going to pay for me to sit on a plane, I'm going to get on it.
Get on it. That's how we do it here, man. Hey, brother, I'll let you go. Thank you so much for your time. Always love talking about the fights. Like we said, incredible weekend for Australian mixed martial arts. Eternal MMA rolls on, 21 days until we do Eternal 88 with John Martin Fraser versus Alfred Stoddard. Like, just can't wait for the next one here. So we're backing up cards like crazy, and I'm all in. Let's keep getting it, and we'll no doubt we'll talk about that one after it. Always a pleasure, man.
Thank you, Luke. Thanks for your time, mate.